Welcome to the webinar, How to Translate Consumer Perspectives into Consumer Health Tech Assessment, a Roadmap in APAC. My name is Josh Haslam, I'm a Research Director here at Lux Research, and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm joined by my colleague, Nardev Ramanathan. He's an Associate Research Director who is leading our consumer health work here at Lux Research. Now, throughout the webinar, you can type any questions you have in the questions box on your screen. Time permitting, we'll answer all those questions that we can. If your question doesn't get answered today, please do not hesitate to respond and send an email to questions@luxresearchinc.com. Now, let's jump into the presentation. Nardev?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Josh. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you about how we can translate consumer perspectives into a consumer health tech assessment roadmap in APAC. Even beyond APAC as well, because the approach and the methodology we'll be discussing today can be applied for markets outside of APAC as well, which you will see. And for an agenda for this morning, we're going to keep it real simple. We're going to first start with the problem that exists in the consumer health markets in APAC and even outside APAC as well, and then talk about how we might approach this problem, and then end off by really talking about what is the strategy that we can adopt, right, to really address this problem, right? So let's get started with the problem. Now, this image of a young adult, using a health wearable and a mobile device to monitor her vital signs is probably synonymous with the huge market opportunity that the APAC region has to offer. After all, the data suggests that some of the largest health wearable markets are in APAC. Like India, for example, surpassed both the US and China to be the world's largest smartwatch market, recording 167% year-on-year growth in 2022, right? And other markets in APAC, such as South Korea and Southeast Asia, also continue to record double-digit growths in, not just the wearable sector, but in other consumer health areas as well, including food and nutrition, right? So all these appear to suggest that betting on APAC by introducing successful products and strategies from North America or Europe is a surefire win. But what you find is that actually some of these large companies are actually struggling to make an impact in Asia, right, or in APAC, right? Fitbit, for example, had to pull out of select Asian markets in a rather surprising move. They had to pull out of Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, South Korea, and Hong Kong in 2023. Takeda, had to sell its consumer health business to Blackstone Group, again in a rather surprising move because Takeda is the largest pharmaceutical in Japan. And Beyond Meat struggled to gain traction in China with its plant-based beef, right? It's been rather successful in other markets, but struggled to gain traction really in China. And the question you're probably wondering is why? How come? These companies are quite successful in other markets, but clearly struggling when it comes to APAC. And the reason is this, right? Fitbit was losing out to competitors because it couldn't adapt to new features for local markets. For example, in local markets in APAC, there was a preference, right, for more slimmer form factors for their smartwatches, right? They preferred something simple, lightweight, more rectangular sort of a face of the watch, right, which was not really available in some of these other products like what Fitbit was offering, right? And the other thing is that there's also price sensitivity, right, where consumers in these markets are looking at low cost sort of entry-level products, right? And they just want very basic features. They don't need all the high-end features that a company like Fitbit offers, right? So these other players could easily adapt and develop a product, right? Entry-level products, lightweight, simple form factors that these consumers want, right? So they couldn't adapt to that. Takeda lost significant market share really with no new products to address evolving market needs. They was very focused on their pharmaceutical business and didn't really evolve their product portfolio on the consumer health side. And Beyond Meat was pushing plant-based beef in a nation that anyway prefers pork. And also, a country like China, they have many other protein alternatives as well, like tofu, other fermented sort of, food items, right, with high protein content. So, you can clearly see that in all these cases, um, it's important to understand the uniqueness of the market that you're going for. And the fact is that APAC is a very heterogeneous market. There are around 48 countries. It comprises 60% of the world's population, right, with over 2,300 languages spoken, a myriad of ethnic groups, different cultures and belief systems. And it's very important to understand, what these consumers really want, what drives um, their sort of needs, and really what they want, right, from these different products and services. And it's clear that one size doesn't fit all. What might have worked in North America, in Europe, they might be very successful there, may not necessarily be something that you can just translate right away into APAC. And likewise, when you think about, markets outside of APAC as well, that's something to consider where something that might have worked very well in even APAC, might need a different approach when you're bringing the technology outside, right? So the message here is one size really doesn't fit all. And so now that we've kind of talked to you about the problem for consumer health in APAC and, when you think more broadly across other markets, the fact that one size really doesn't fit all, right? What is the approach that then we can take to address this challenge? And so we propose really laying out a roadmap that leverages two key frameworks, right? So these two key frameworks, right, really consist first of using AI-based anthropological insights to really understand and decode, right, sort of implicit belief systems that are driving consumer behaviors, right? Obviously, you're talking about APAC consumers in this presentation, but again, it's applicable to other markets as well, right? And the second is really to layer that insights, the information that you've extracted from using anthropological insights, and use a tech assessment framework, right? Which we call the Lux Consumer Health Radar, to then understand how you can evaluate the landscape and look for innovators or products and services that can address those challenges. And then, potentially look at either developing the technology in-house or developing partnerships or making the right investments as well, right? So these are the two key frameworks that we believe is really important for you to take, to consider as you want to really tackle this problem. So let's first talk about AI-based anthropological insights or predictive anthropology, as we call it, right? So really, we have a team at Lux Research, right, who use predictive anthropology and AI to study millions of online conversations, right? So they look at social media analytics, so direct conversations about a certain topic, and then use their expertise in anthropology to decode the sort of direct and indirect implications, the context of those discussions, and understand the implicit beliefs of the consumer using the expertise. The methodology really involves a combination of machine learning, machine intelligence, as well as the expertise from trained PhD anthropologists, right, to really extract that information. Now, the interesting thing is that you can actually work in scale, right? The data is taken from over 20 million US consumers and globally across 13 other countries as well. And if you're thinking about a representation, well, it's 2024, so there's tons of data out there, and it's not a huge problem to get a representative sample of consumers between the ages of 18 and 74. So you're probably wondering, what can we really use predictive anthropology for, right? And it's really to extract the consumer pain points from existing products for a given market. Now, in the first part, we talked about some of the challenges these big companies faced, right? Because they felt they could just bring existing products into these markets. But it's really important to understand from the consumer perspective, what are some important features that they are expecting, and what are some pain points, right, that they face, right, for existing products, right? So by using predictive anthropology, we can look at different products, right? In this case, 3 products here in this particular figure, but you can look at multiple different products as well, and then use predictive anthropology to extract these consumer pain points for these different products. Now, there can be one, there can be several, right? And once you've identified these different pain points, you can now develop a strategy to address these pain points, right? So that is the first framework, right? Using predictive anthropology, really understanding, what is really driving consumer beliefs, right? And how it's, shaping what, how they really are looking for, these products and services. Now, once you understand that, right, what you can do as a next step is to really layer those insights with a framework that better understands and captures these opportunities from a technology perspective. And that's where the Lux Consumer Health Radar comes in. And that is comprised of 2 different elements. So the first element is what you see here, which is really a sort of a spectrum, if you will. It's called the Lux Health Spectrum, right? And the idea here is to really understand the different intermediate health states a consumer experiences across their health journey, right? For any given diseases. Obviously, this is more relevant in the case of chronic diseases, but it can be applicable for a broad range of diseases as well, starting from healthy to at risk, pre-disease, disease, and severe disease, right? Now, the first half of this, I should say, or the first early part of this spectrum is where it's more of a preventive paradigm, where technologies can really look at potentially preventing a consumer from being officially diagnosed with a disease, and there's opportunities for early detection and prevention, right? Of course, once you're diagnosed with a disease, let's say diabetes or a cardiovascular condition, then it's more of a treatment paradigm. And of course, there are certain treatment that your physician may recommend, but there is a lot of things that you can do at home as well, using at-home monitoring tools, wearable technologies, and so on, to make lifestyle interventions that can potentially reduce complications of your disease, right? So that's the first element of the Lux Consumer Health Radar. The second element, it really aims to build on that concept, right? Because we now know that there are multiple elements out there, many of them, external also, that really impact a consumer's health, right? And we've identified 3 different levels. The first level is really the intrinsic level. So everything internal to a consumer, meaning to say that everything that occurs, essentially internally from a biological perspective, right? So if there's some genetic risks, let's say, that predisposes an individual to a certain condition, that is intrinsic level 1 factor. It could be a physiological response, injuries, things like that, everything to do internally to an individual. The second element is the lifestyle element, which we call the level 2 element here. And that's everything related to lifestyle choices, right? So this is everything that, is, again, related to your lifestyle choices, like your dietary choices, personal care, even the clothes that you choose to wear. They all have some form of impact on your health. And last but not least is the environmental element, right? So this is level 3. And this is essentially everything around the consumer, right? Because now we know that air quality, light, right, impacts your sleep, humidity, temperature, even ergonomics where you're working, where you're sitting. All of that has some form of impact, either mentally or other forms, or it can impact your health in different ways as well, right? So these are all the three different levels, right? That we think is important and has a big impact on a consumer's health. We call this the Lux Physical Lens. And when we put two of this together, right, that's where we get our Lux Consumer Health Radar, which really aims to capture all the different intermediate health states that a consumer can experience, as well as capturing all the internal and external environmental factors that could have an impact on the end consumer, right? And what this really allows you to do is to be able to look at the market and understand, where different technologies are impacting the consumer at what level, right? Is it from a healthy angle, more on the disease side? Is it an intrinsic or an external or a lifestyle, right? You can start to identify, where different products can fit in. It might be your own products, it might be your competitors' products and services, or even just what's out there, right? And identify potential white spaces that you can maybe dig into a bit more with the understanding that you've derived from predictive anthropology, right? And we're going to really bring this to life with a use case, right, to show you how we can really use this. And the use case that I want to talk about, right, I believe will be familiar to many, right? What is the one thing that we all need but never really seem to get enough of? Any guesses from the audience? Well, I think we can all agree that sleep is probably, one of these factors, right? I can certainly attest to the fact that I could do with more sleep. It's a very important element, right, of your overall health. And obviously, there's been many studies done, right, to document this, to better understand this. But many of these studies tend to be very qualitative in nature, right? They are very survey based, and often the results can differ depending on, which, you know, consumer segments you're looking at, which markets you're looking at, which age groups you're looking at. Now, we found this one study that was very objective because it actually used a health wearable, in this case, a smart ring from Aura, one of the leading developers in this space, right? So very objective data, and they looked at over 30 countries in this study. And it's a large scale. They looked at over 100,000 volunteers, and it's a long-term study done over a period of many months, right? And what they found was pretty interesting, right? Because they look at many geographies, and if you kind of focus on the bottom half of this figure, right, and you look at the 6 countries in the bottom of the figure, they are all countries in APAC, right? Thailand, Hong Kong, India, Singapore, South Korea, and Japan, right? And this is obviously a very busy figure, right? But it's telling you that consumers in these markets, they are sleeping, they have a poorer quality of sleep, they take longer to sleep, and they sleep less, right? They sleep on average around 6 to 7 hours on weekdays. Japan actually being the lowest in that particular table. And poor sleep quality, as I've said earlier, we know can impact individuals in multiple ways. It's the root cause of multiple major diseases, from cognitive health to diabetes. It leads to huge economic impacts, right? Both directly, obviously, to the individual and the healthcare costs that impact him or her, but also indirectly from an economic productivity standpoint, because now you have a subpar individual with certain health conditions, and he or she is less likely to be productive, right? They might not, work very well. They may be sleepy, and if you have many people, in that same bucket, it's not a great thing to have for a given region, right? And when you look at what this market is like, and what the forecast of that market is like, the sleep health market is projected to grow at a steady CAGR, right, or compounded annual growth rate of around 5.4% globally. But if you look at APAC specifically, right, the rate of growth there is actually expected to double over the same period, with Japan being a major market in the region. which comes as no surprise, right? Because the data clearly shows that, Japan is, one of the most sleep-deprived nations, certainly in that particular study. So naturally, what we did was to use our framework, right? To first of all use our predictive anthropology to look at, some of these key consumer devices that are being used for sleep health, right? And we've identified three major devices here that are used in the Japanese market. So sleep trackers, white noise and noise reduction devices, as well as light therapy devices, and really look to understand the pain points, right, behind, these existing products in the market. So when we start with sleep trackers, these are some of the pain points that were identified, right? Size and comfort is one, right? So if you look at, the product examples in Japan, they use, smartwatches are quite commonly used there, but also, EEG or electroencephalography, which is a sensor that detects brain waves. These sensors are used in these headband form factors, as well as even, sleep sensors placed in mattresses, right? So size and comfort was identified as something that's an issue. A headband, it's not very convenient for someone sleeping, right? And often the size of it also is a bit prohibitive. Concerns around cost, that's an issue as well. And effectiveness versus alternatives. Consumers are concerned how effective a certain product is. And if, in fact, there could be alternatives, cheaper alternatives, right? For example, anti-snoring tape was indicated as something that some consumers prefer to use versus some of these products. And last but not least, skin irritation. This is more related to smart rings, as it may be a bit irritating to be used, on a regular basis, right? So those are some pain points identified there. For white noise and noise reduction devices, in Japan, white noise machines are commonly used, but also sleep buds, or rather earplugs, right, that are used to block out noise. So these are commonly used there. But concerns raised around this were lack of Bluetooth or remote control to be able to control this better. Just simple fixes, right? But some of these products didn't have them. High-pitched noises around these white noise machines and repetitive noise patterns as well. Some of these devices tend to have looping patterns, and after a while, your brain picks that up. It becomes tiresome. Poor fit and air tightness, right? Some of these earbuds, they just drop off while you're sleeping. And finally, when you look at light therapy devices, not many products out there. Couple here: brain, sleep clock, and aroma. So this is essentially white light with aroma therapy together. Or you have these sleep masks that have light in them, right? But limited options obviously was raised as a concern there, as a pain point. High cost, they're not very cheap, especially these white light devices, and also how effective they are and the features, they tend to be quite limited, right? So these are some of the pain points, right, identified. So when you look at the Japanese market, you now understand these are very unique aspects that Japanese consumers are concerned about. So now understanding this, right, we can actually develop a strategy, right? We have looked at that first layer using predictive anthropology to understand, these consumer pain points unique to that market. Now, how can we use and layer in, right, our tech assessment roadmap to identify, some interesting opportunities here? So let's look at sleep trackers first, right? And we talked about sleep trackers, some pain points here being the size and comfort. If you think about the headbands, right, not the most comfortable, tend to get in the way of your sleep, and how effective they are in the first place, right? And the way you want to use your consumer health radar here is essentially to look at that existing product and map it into the consumer health radar where it best fits, right? So when you think about your EEG headbands, right, they are meant to address an intrinsic factor, right? They're trying to address your your sleep pattern, basically trying to improve your sleep, right? But they're geared more towards healthier consumers, right? Because they don't aim to treat or diagnose any disease, but rather meant for, healthier consumers who may have, some, periods in time, right, where they're not having good sleep, right? So they're looking at the healthy and at risk part of the consumer health radar, but clearly not doing a very good job. So when we use this consumer health radar to really look at this space and try to understand how we can, really look for interesting innovators that are addressing this issue, right? Particularly around the ergonomics, right? Because it drops off, right? We found Neurobit Technologies, right? A Singaporean startup, fairly early stage, but they're interesting because they're completely ditching the idea of a headband in the first place, right? And they said, well, can we use something less intrusive? And can we go for something like a chest patch as a form factor, right? So as you see here, right? So less intrusive, you can just have it, underneath your clothing, right? Very simple. And the way they do this is by actually using an ECG sensor, right? That really aims to pick up your heart rate. And back end, what they do is they work with a range of clinical organizations and hospitals to connect ECG data or your heart rate data with brainwave data, right? So they're looking at multi-channel data, which many hospitals have access to, right? And they understand the link between how your heart rate changes in relation to your brainwave patterns, right? And make that link back end and use AI to be able to make those sort of recommendations, right, to improve your sleep, right? And because they work with many clinical healthcare organizations, they actually have access to data around more diseased individuals as well, because now they understand, what chronic insomnia patients face, or what sleep apnea patients are facing, or sometimes these patients have other chronic conditions like diabetes and cardiovascular conditions. So now this device can potentially not only address the entire health spectrum from healthy to severe disease on level 1, but they also address the ergonomic aspect, right? Because now, from an environmental perspective, they're just less intrusive to use, and just doesn't create the same problems that a headband does, right? So this is one interesting way where you can really use both these frameworks to identify an interesting innovator. Now let's look at white noise and noise reduction devices, right? So one of the pain points that was brought up was repetitive noise patterns, right? So, these looping noises tends to get tiresome, right? And when you do that mapping, again, on the consumer health radar, you find that, it aims to address that environmental piece, right? The white noise, right? So it's looking at the third level. And again, on the healthier side, right? Because these devices don't aim to treat or diagnose any disease. So looking at more of the healthy at risk, or sometimes, pre-disease where, they're really having issues sleeping. But clearly they don't do it very well, right? Because consumers, find that's a bit tiresome, right? So again, when we use this health radar to look at, what are some interesting innovations out there that can address this problem, we came across a company called Adaptive Sound Technologies Inc., or ASTI for short, and they have a product called Electrofan, right, which is an expanded range of non-looping noise patterns, right? So again, a very simple fix, right? And they have also an expanded range of different kinds of noises. We've heard of white noise, but they have brown noise, which is a low rumbling noise. They have blue noise, which is more related to, patterns around water movement, river flowing, waves coming on the ocean, things like that. Also pink noises, which are a combination of both. So clearly, more accessible to a broad range of consumers. And also, fan noises as well is something that they have. And it comes at a cost of $50. So again, addresses some cost concerns that some consumers have, right? And so it addresses the environmental piece, right, that other devices do not do very well. But what this company also found was that the consumers were also using this when they were awake, when they're just reading a book or working, because these noises help them focus and concentrate better. And as we know, if you have a better sort of environment when you're working and you're studying, right? That helps improve your sleep in the later part of the day as well, right? So clearly addressing the level 2 element here as well. And finally, when you look at light therapy devices, right, I want to highlight these sleep masks here. And one concern that was raised was, firstly, how effective was it, and also the features around it, right? It's not very comfortable. You can fall off while you're sleeping. So just like your white noise device, it maps to that level 3, right? Looking to address that ergonomic feature, but again, not doing a very good job, right? Certainly for the Japanese market. So when we use this radar again to try to identify some interesting innovators that are addressing this pain point, we found this company called Helite Sleep, right? That emits pure red light at a wavelength of 630 nanometers for only 14 minutes and then it fades out, right? So you can potentially address concerns if you're sleeping with a partner, right? If the partner gets, disturbed by having a constant white noise, a white light, right? The whole sort of night, right? That's not very great, but this quickly fades out after 14 minutes, right? And they've done studies to show that the light that passes through the eyelids actually interacts with photosensitive cells to promote deeper and restful sleep. So Light addresses the environmental element, but also now it addresses that intrinsic element, right? Because there are studies that validates how this light is actually improving your sleep, right? Through interaction with photosensitive cells. So hopefully we've shown you how you can use both predictive anthropology, right, as that first step, and then use it in conjunction with our Lux Consumer Health Radar, which is really a sort of a model, right, that you can use to better identify, interesting opportunities out there, right, by first understanding where your products sit, the challenges around it, and how you can potentially find innovators that are addressing those pain points, right? And for a quick win, if you're wondering, if you are in the sleep health space, for example, you're probably wondering what, who you could engage with. You could even think about, engaging a couple of different partners here, right? We talked about ASTI, right, with the electrofan, right, where they're delivering these different noises that are, non-looping and consumers enjoy much better, right? And combine that with a wearable chest patch, right? Because that addresses the intrinsic factor, right? And it addresses the entirety of the health spectrum. So imagine if you use the combination of the chest patch, right, together with the white noise device that ASTI has developed. It could be potentially a great win because it addresses the entirety now of your health radar, right? Or a huge part of your health radar, right? So really delivering maximum impact to your consumer. Now, we've used sleep health as a use case, right, to demonstrate how you can combine anthropological insights in combination with the consumer health radar. But you can potentially use this for different use cases as well, diabetes, cardiovascular conditions, and other, mental health and so on as well. So it's very use case dependent, but, we've shown you how you can use it, in this case for sleep health. So I want to end off with a few key takeaways here, right? The first really is around, really understanding the context, right, behind, what you're looking to address with the consumers, right? We talked about APAC consumers being diverse and unique and requiring contextualized understanding, but it's very important, even if you're working outside of APAC, right, to have that understanding. Second, you really want to start by first decoding these implicit beliefs unique to your market. Again, we talked about the APAC market, and again, very specifically in Japan, but you can apply the same approach in other markets as well. And finally, use our Lux Consumer Health Radar, right, as a way to scan, right, the landscape out there, see where your products fit in there, and what are the current pain points and how you can deliver better impact to your consumers by identifying those areas that require addressing, right? And with that, I'll end my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thanks, Nardev. And again, we're now going to take questions. So any questions you have, please type them into the questions box. If we don't get to it today, again, someone at Lux will be in touch after the webinar to get those. And Nardev, it does look like we have some questions coming in. I think we have a few minutes here. The first is, as you've connected predictive anthropology to a technology framework, how easy is this to include into a workflow? So how much effort does it take to connect these two kind of disparate sources of information?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Josh. The answer is it's really simple, actually, right? So, first of all, use predictive anthropology. You can work with us. Understand those contexts, and then you can very quickly use that information to identify, right, what are these pain points, what are these products, right, the consumers are concerned about, right, and essentially use the framework to quickly do a quick mapping, right? Understand where these products fit in, understand those white spaces, understand what's not being solved, right, by these products and services,
Mm.
and then use it as a way to identify, right, interesting technologies, interesting products and services. And sometimes it might be a very simple, there might be a simple quick win out there, right? We talked about ASTI having the Electrofan, right? That quickly addresses things
Right.
like, looping noises, and you can potentially combine, right, uh, different technologies together, stitch something together as well. So it's very, to answer the question, it's very simple, very easy to use. You just have to start first with the predictive anthropology layer and then add on the tech
So you
assessment
just need
roadmap
the
as
you
the next
just
step.
need to have a framework to use, and right. So once you have a framework to use and a predictive anthropology data set, that's when it becomes easy. So developing those may take some time, but once you do have them or have examples of them, you can put them together. Okay, well that's great.
Exactly.
One last question quickly. If there was another area today, right, where you think one of these analyses could really pay off, where would you focus?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say mental health is a big area. If I had to pick one, obviously there are many, but this is an area that we've identified at Lux Research that's really come out, especially after the pandemic, as something that's been underserved, right? Especially in a lot of APAC markets, but even outside of APAC, right? And the interesting thing about mental health is that
Mm-hmm.
often it's been seen as a very intrinsic element, right? But we know now that so many different factors, right? Your lifestyle choices that you make, where you sit, where uh, how things are positioned in your office environment or your home, right? All play a part, right? And it's important to understand all of that. And I think that's a really big opportunity there, especially when you look at companies or technologies that are really trying to take those things into account. Uh, you know, those could be some,
For sure.
interesting quick wins there.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks, Nardev, again. Everybody, that concludes our webinar for today. We really appreciate you coming in and listening. The slide presentation and the recording from the webinar will be sent to all attendees via email today. Now, after leaving the webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a survey on the presentation. We'd really appreciate any feedback you may have to help inform and improve our future webinars. So please take a moment, check it out, and also check out our upcoming webinars. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.